وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.
Welcome everybody this evening. We welcome our brother, our teacher, our Sheikh, Dr. Mustafa Baig, today with a topic that is interesting, especially this month. We are waiting the month of Ramadan. May Allah accept us all and make us, inshallah, reach this month. As always, we have these discussions before Ramadan, before Eid, before Hajj, but especially before Ramadan. It's about the moon sighting, and always Saudi Arabia is ahead of everybody with this topic. I think because of the reputation and the place this country, I mean Saudi Arabia, has in Muslims' heart, but in the same time, people maybe in around the world in other countries that disagree with Saudi Arabia with some of these issues of moon sighting. We want to understand why these issues exist and about Islamic law as well. Do we have to follow Saudi Arabia's moon sighting? I think Dr. Mustafa is interested in this topic a long time ago. Dr. Mustafa, his PhD in Islamic law about Islamic law and minorities in the West, especially. So in this topic, here, inshallah, he will talk about it for an hour or 45 minutes, and we'll lead the discussion after that. Please.
You have some waiting for unmute.
It's a privilege to be able to speak to you here today about this very important yet controversial topic as well that we seem to visit every year without debating at all. And thank the Saudi Society here for inviting me to present this talk. Some of the brothers from the Saudi Society who are from Saudi Arabia have had some discussions with me about this topic, and we were thinking that we should make this into something more formal where more people can attend. We can have a frank discussion about the topic. Just as a preliminary note, I was advised that some audience members may not be very strong in English and only speak Arabic, so I will try to be slow in my speech in English. I will try to add some Arabic vocabulary where I can, and also try to simplify my use of the English language. If anyone does not understand anything, or if I'm going too fast, please do stop me and ask me to explain or slow down. I'll be more than happy to do that. So we're here in the name of having a frank discussion about this topic. And as you can see from the title, I've written moon sighting or moon fighting because it's normally a fight of the moon every Ramadan and every Eid at least. And okay, so we have to have this discussion and this debate every year. But we approach this topic with sincerity, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give the tawfiq to be sincere and have ikhlas in everything that we approach. And as with any problem or difficulty, the first step is to have ikhlas. And I think with ikhlas and good intention and husn niyyah, we can, if not provide a solution to problems, which is what would be, of course, ideal, is at least we can come to an understanding that we all share in, that we can all engage in, and we can at least have a discursive platform we can at least come to a platform on which we are all able to discuss on certain terms and on a certain level. So I think that's the importance of having a good intention and having a spirit of openness when we approach topics, especially those that are controversial and maybe sensitive and maybe quite dear to some. And I know this topic can actually cause real fighting and aggression sometimes. Among certain people, we get very worked up and heated about this particular topic. And some of that will probably come to light today. Why is it such a heated topic? And why is it such a point of disagreement amongst people? Every Ramadan. It should be every month, to be honest. No one's interested in citing the moon every month. One of the things I'll mention at the end, solution, perhaps, or a way forward, is that we do begin to cite the moon every month rather than just be concerned about this in Ramadan. And when you do that, and you are only concerned with Ramadan and Eid, this is actually one of the reasons why we have the problem, because systematic moon sighting is not happening beforehand. So you don't have kind of a cumulative effect on the way the moon is sighted, but it's just because previous months may have errors in them, then when you approach Ramadan and Eid, you're also going to have problems. So let's move on swiftly. I'm going to speak for about 45 minutes, I think, and then we will have a discussion. And also, not only thanks to the Islamic Society, but also the Islamic Society is present here as well. They advertise this event, so it's kind of happening joint between the Saudi Society and the Islamic Society. That's quite befitting, actually, as will be made clear in this presentation. Perhaps we should have the Moroccan Society here as well, actually. As you can see in one of my slides. Okay, so okay. So basics in terms of the Sharia. So we know that the moon historically has been associated with times, and it's associated with, of course, with many things in this world. It's a celestial object which has great significance for this world of ours, and especially for timekeeping and for calendars. We know the moon phases are about 29.5 days every month on average. For that reason, it's been very useful for a measure and a criteria for establishing new months. And what are our sources, basically? So I'll go through this quite quickly because I think we're all kind of settled on this particular issue, apart from very few people, by the way, also, who also have an issue here, actually, which you'll be surprised about. So the Quran is very clear when the Prophet ﷺ is asked about the Ahillah, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ قُلْ هِيَ مَوَاقِيتُ لِلنَّاسِ وَالْحَجِّ. So they ask you about the Ahillah, the presents, plural of Hilal, Ahillah. They ask you about the presents. What are they for? What's their purpose? They are mawaqit for the people for Hajj, for the timing, so to set the ibadah, the acts of worship and Hajj. So the Quran is basically mansus, there is nas about the Hilal, right? So avoiding or getting away from the Hilal, this is a non-starter. Our starting point and our foundation for any discussion about starting the new months begins with the Hilal. There is no avoiding it and no getting away from the Hilal because the Quran is mansus, the explicit text of the Quran, and the purpose for why this verse was revealed, Masiyatu Kalamuli Ajali, as we say, is the fact that it's the Hilal that establishes the new months. So we're all clear about the Hilal is our foundational point on which every Muslim must agree on, because that's the meaning of the Quran. And of course, we have many ample hadith in this respect. Just if you sumu bi ru'yatihi wa aqbilu bi ru'yatihi, and similar ones as well. La tasumu hatta tarawu al-hilal, which is negation, right? So it's even stronger. So do not. I should translate the first one actually. So fast when you see the moon, and end the fasting when you see the moon. In other words, when the time for Eid comes, and Ramadan. And if it is, if the moon is obscure, if there is, as you can see here, if there is a ghubar, or there is ghumma, in ghumma in Muslim tradition, then what do? You complete 30 days. Simple as that. And do not fast until you sight the moon. So you wait for the hilal to be sighted, and then you see the moon. And from the seerah and from the hadith literature, this is how we know the Sahaba used to do it. Go out, sight the moon, and they would tell the Prophet, or would they ask the Prophet, is the new moon, when is it going to be sighted? Go out there, sight the moon. When you see it, we start a new month. It's actually quite simple, right? And don't end until you see the new moon. And if you don't see it, then it's also very simple. You complete 30 days. We know the other tradition of the Prophet, which is Shahru Hakada or Hakada. And the first time when he said the Hakada, he raised 29 fingers. And the second time he raised 29 fingers in total. And then the second time he raised all of his fingers 3 times, 30 times. So a day is either 29 days or 30 days. And this is also testimony and proof to the truth of the Prophet's message. That we know that modern science today says that the month is either 29 days or 30 days. Approximately half the months are 29 days, and the rest will be 30 days. 1400 years ago, this was established by the Prophet in very simple terms, and modern science does not disagree with this because we have a day of 29 days or 30 days. On average, 29.5 page 29.53 to be exact. So we're clear here that the Hilal is our starting point, our foundational point, and that's what the sources tell us. By sources, I'm referring here to the Quran and the Sunnah, and of course all of the madhabs and the fuqaha, in which there is no difference of opinion on this particular issue. We can talk a little bit about the role of astronomy later. That's going to come in here as well. So if we're talking about sighting only, then what does that mean for astronomy or scientific calculations in determining the numerals? So we'll come on to that. I want to get into the science of it pretty much straight away in terms of the moon visibility maps. This is last Dhul Hijjah, in which there was another issue regarding when is the Eid going to take place, right? The Eid al-Adha. And in this country, in the UK, and that's happened in some other countries, but particularly here, where we don't have a unified Islamic authority. My brother Ahmed here just mentioned about my PhD, which comes out of my research interest as well, relates to this, which is that when you have no Islamic authority, how do you make decisions about certain Islamic rulings? And one of those would be the moon sighting events, where in a Muslim country you have an Islamic authority, an Islamic jurisdiction will make these announcements and make these decisions. In the UK, we have various organizations, which you might call authorities, but there's no single authority that has legal enforcement power that everybody must listen to and that everybody abides by. In fact, before even commencing my PhD and my master's studies, the first article I ever wrote when I was in university was actually about moon sighting, because in university there was lots of debates and discussions, and I got personally very interested in it and researched them out and started to look at these moon visibility maps. It looks quite complicated here, possibly if it's the first time you're seeing one of these, but this is actually a way to make it very simple. What this map basically tells you is the possibility of sighting the moon in various regions of the world. And it's based on criteria, and that criteria is determined through some calculations. The particular criteria that we're using here is that which is from the HM Almanac, or commonly known as the Royal Observatory of this country. Astronomers don't tend to disagree on the criteria of when is it possible to sight the moon. There are some general things of which there's a kind of consensus and ijma around, at least in terms of when the moon cannot be sighted. And that's what I want to draw more of your attention to. Let's look at a way we can move forward on this. Let's look at impossibility. When is it not possible to see the moon? And we can exclude that. So by a process of exclusion, as those of you doing some science and maths commonly do, by a process of exclusion, can we come to some factors or some pointers that we can all gather around? So we had this moon visibility map for the Dhul-Hijjah of last year. As you can see here, it was a difficult matter because the moon here you can see in parts of Africa with this color code of what you can see is like reddish orangey color here, which is that it's not observable or not visible with a conventional telescope. So you've got the map, you've got various colors, and you've got a color code here, how you can follow when is it possible to sight the new moon, right? If it's red, the moon sets before sunset, so there's obviously no chance of seeing it at all, right? So you've got these various colors and letters here that you can associate here with the map and determine when is it possible to sight the moon. So we had an announcement that the moon was sighted, and this announcement came from Saudi Arabia, that the moon is being sighted. On the other hand, we had scholars who were looking at the science and saying, we have a problem here because the data tells us that it's not possible to sight the moon in Saudi Arabia, right? So this whole category, otherwise, beyond this is below the bench limit, right? We can explain that as well shortly when we look at some of the data in more detail. So it caused a problem. We had an announcement that the moon's been sighted, yet the data and the moon visibility maps, it's the same as the data, told us that the moon cannot be sighted. What happens in this particular situation? So some people in the UK and some masajid, some mosques will say, we will follow the first announcement, which is Saudi Arabia. Others will say, because the moon is not possible to be seen, we are not going to commence the new month. Sometimes this map might be more obvious in that most of the planet will be able to sight the moon, but announcement will be made from Saudi Arabia. So what is going on here, right? This was the confusion that I had and many other people have. How can you have an announcement when the science is saying something else, yet there's a reported sighting of the moon?
Sorry, the Qaeda was 29. The Qaeda in this case.
In this case, it was 29, yeah. This case, last year, 29 days, and there was a sighting, and then the moon was announced. So here you can see the moon visibility map for the 30th of June. So we looked at 29th June. So the rest of the world, according to the moon visibility map here, and sightings from various parts of the world, announced that for the 30th of June, that was going to be when the new month, or when Dhul Hijjah was going to be declared for the following day, right? For the following day. I'm going to have lots of these maps, by the way, right? Lots of these maps. So I hope you'll like looking at maps. So we have some basic moon sighting criteria, right? Basic moon sighting criteria, which allows us to sight the moon. So as we know that the moon does not have its own light, I don't want to give a lesson in science here, I'm not a qualified astronomer anyway. But just some basic knowledge about the moon, how it's sighted. So the moon does not have its own light; it gets its light from the sun, right? So how is it possible to sight that moon at the beginning of the month? So you have the new moon, the birth of the new moon, and when the birth of the moon happens, you cannot see the moon, right? In Arabic, we call this the mahaq, right? You can't see the moon. It's in a shape of which there is not enough luminosity of the moon for it to be seen. The moon is always there, by the way. It's not like the moon disappears and goes away, right? If you think it's ghaib just because there's not enough nur from the shams, from the sun, right? So the moon age, a very basic criteria that everybody can use here, right? Because scientific literacy is something that we lack, and I think something that can actually go some way towards solving this issue. So general rule, moon cannot be sighted less than 40 hours. Rare if it's less than 24 hours, and it's usually visible by the time it's 30 hours. So from the time of birth, and when the moon's age is at least around 18 hours, 24 hours, then you can start thinking about something. So if you get a claim that the moon is being sighted and the moon is only 8 hours old, 10 hours old, it cannot be seen, right? I think the world record is about one sighting happened. I think it was like 12 and a half hours. Was the world record. Before that, it was like 14 hours or something. So that was a record. But you will not really be able to see the moon under 40 hours. And any claims like this usually need to be verified by astronomers in the scientific community will verify whether such a sighting happened. Maybe somebody saw something different, right? So a lag time of 50 minutes or more is required between moonset and sunset, which basically means that from when the sun sets, so the sun has to set first. If the sun is still in the sky, you can't see the moon because of the light of the sun. So the sun has to set first, and the moon will be somewhere around the sun. When we're in the northern hemisphere, like the UK, it will be slightly west of the sun, right? So if you want to see it, keep an eye on where the sun set. After the sun has set, you want to wait around 50 odd minutes to see the possibility of the present. And the shape will be in the northern hemisphere, where we are, will be like a C, but the other way around, right? A curly shape crescent, as we know, but the other way around. If you're at the equator in the southern hemisphere, it would be like a normal C. But for us, it would be the other way around. So that's another way, by the way. You can ask somebody, if you saw the moon, can you tell us, what? And if they tell you they saw it in the wrong direction, or they saw it on the opposite side of the sun, or somewhere else, then you know there's a problem. Right? And the reason why we also know this, which I'll come to, is that as we know that the sun rises from the east and sets in the west, which is why we call it Maghrib. Is where the sun sets in the west. The moon does the opposite, right? So it rises from the west and it sets in the east, right? It rises. That's why when the sun is setting, the moon will be rising at around the same place. Because when the moon sets, it's in the west, and when the moon rises, it's in the west, right? Both in the west, setting and rising of the moon, right? So we need about 50 minutes between the sunset and the moonset, because the moon will set after a while, right? On its first day, first time. So we've got here, elongation has to exceed 10 degrees. Right? This is called what we call bu'd an shams in the Arabic text. And by the way, another reason for us to be interested in this, because Islam and astronomy have had a very close relationship from very early on. The greatest astronomers and scientists in history were actually Muslim scholars. In the golden age of Islam, it was the Muslims that really developed this science of astronomy, and it's a proud part of our tradition when people think that, oh, what did the Muslims contribute to civilization, to science, and to technology? One thing you can at least stick up and show them is the science of astronomy, which they really, really excelled in, and also provided a means for Western scholars in during the Enlightenment to benefit from, right? And by the way, in the West, when you're doing this kind of things, like people might know the story of Galileo, at the same time when the Muslims were excelling in this, if you were doing this kind of thing in the West, you'd probably be imprisoned or persecuted for doing science, because they had that much of an aversion to science and believed it was anti-religious, so you'd be persecuted, imprisoned, and just check the story of Galileo, what happens on the other side. And that's why it's often been referred to as the Dark Ages, where the Islamic world at that time was referred to as the Golden Age. The next one is irtifa, right, which needs to be 10 degrees. So this is the altitude that the moon needs to be above the horizon, about 10 degrees, right? And now the reason for this elongation is because if the sun and the moon are too close together, right, then what happens is that the moon will be inside the rays of the sun, right? It will be inside the sun, and there's a slight error there, which I'll just double check. It should be 5 degrees, sorry. Altitude should be 5 degrees. Elongation 10 degrees. The altitude should be 5 degrees. I just write it quickly like that. So make it just a correction there. So the elongation, because it needs to be further away from the sun enough so it can be seen. Otherwise, it will be hidden within the rays of the sun. So you can't see the moon. Right? You can't see the moon at the sunset. Altitude also, as I said, needs to be 5 degrees above the horizon, so that it's high enough for it to be seen. So not any single of these factors will determine necessarily that you can see the moon, right? Not necessarily. So you need a combination of all of these in order to be sure that it's possible to sight the moon. That's the basis for the criteria. So you're going to say, what are all these numbers now? There's a lot of numbers on there, right? One is for Riyadh and one is for Mecca. So those figures that I gave you, if you are able to go onto the website of the HM as we know as the Royal Observatory, then you are able to pull up the figures for any city, major city in the world, and check whether the moon is visible. And again, you've got the same criteria, the same table of that. So again, we have a situation. So like, just go back to what we were looking at here, right? For June, Dhul Hijjah, the last one. So I thought it's a good idea to let's talk about the last event we had in the problem. You can see the code, and I do thank the brothers here for bearing with me to present details of various cities that you might be from actually in this presentation. Right? So we have Riyadh here, and you can see the code at the end, which is the simplest way. If you don't want to bother with all of the figures, all you do is you go to this code here, right? The code is F, meaning on Wednesday, 29th of June at night, was it possible to sight the moon in Riyadh? What do you get? F, not visible, it's below the danger limit, impossible to sight, right? The next day, of course, it's A. We have the same for Makkah. I put Makkah here for a reason. Of course, it's the most holiest location for us in Islam, but there's also another reason related to that, actually, why I put Makkah here. So you can see F and A. And those things that I just said to you before about the age of the moon, you can see the age of the moon is 12 hours 54 minutes. You've got an altitude of 5 degrees. That's azimuth. You can ignore some of these we don't need. Elongation 7 degrees. And you can see the moon set. And you can see the lag time is also 32 minutes here. The best time, if there was one, would be 7 o'clock, which is actually what time do we have at sunset here? Yeah. So about half an hour after the sun sets. But as you can see, the code is F, so there's no point even going out to try to attempt to see that. So similar problem happened for Ramadan of that year. So just go back a little bit, a few months. Ramadan, same issue. So we had 2 dates for the start of the moon. One was based on visibility maps and a data like this, where we had a code F for Saudi Arabia. But, and also you can see here, the only place that could possibly sight the moon was, the Polynesian Islands or the west coast of America had some chance. You can see it's called C, visible to the unaided eye. after finding optical aid, so you probably need some sort of telescope in the markets to sight the moon. So this is what happened in Ramadan, and of course, because of the hour difference, even if you were going to take a sight from America, you wouldn't be able to do that, because let's say the West Coast is about what, if there's 6 or 7 hours difference in time, and your Maghrib time in the UK, whenever that falls, you're not going to be waiting, again, depending on sunset time there, 5, 6, 7 hours for an announcement from America. It's impractical, even if you wanted to go for a global site. So it wouldn't work. I'll talk a bit about that more later. So, interesting point I want to mention here is, so we've got the visibility map here for the 1st of April, right? So this one's for Ramadan. Okay, correct. So an interesting point in here, or an interesting thing that's thrown into the mix here, is Morocco, right? And some of you who are familiar with this debate will think that, has this become an issue about Morocco and Saudi Arabia? And I know in the Gulf context, more like, oh, Oman is always a day after Saudi Arabia. What's going on? Just, Oman just doesn't like us, so they just want to be different to Saudi. Whatever we do, Oman will always do something different, right? I've heard this from some of our brothers. I think that's what it is with the Oman. They always want to go their own way, right? But we have Morocco as well, right? What happened on the same day when we had an announcement here that it was seen in Saudi? I'll tell you where it was seen as well, right? Morocco reported a negative sighting, and in Morocco, one thing we are aware of is that Morocco do proper moon sighting, and they have 278 locations in the whole country where they have moon sighting committees, trained moon sighters, that go and sight the moon, and if they see it, they have to report it to a judge, and then the judge will verify the sighting, and then they will announce it, right? Having been to Morocco, discussed with some of the scholars who are part of the Majlis al-Ulama there, as you can see, my quest for this went quite far, right? But I happened to be in Morocco, and I met one of the scholars who's on the board, and I verified all of this with him, and we actually requested them to give us a lecture on the topic. And he did give a very brilliant lecture, both on the basis of science, on the basis of Sharia as well. It was a very comprehensive lecture. He was really an expert in the topic, right? And he gave us, it wasn't just me, there's a delegation of about 13, 14 of us from the UK, and he was very persuasive and convincing, and we were really satisfied in the moon sighting measures of Morocco. So let's see what happens in Morocco. Right? 278 points in Morocco, different places. They went out to sight the moon, and no moon was sighted. No moon was sighted, right? And you get a fax, usually, so you can verify where it's come from. Now I've got a direct link, so I can call this scholar myself, and I did do last time. It said, has the moon been sighted in Morocco? And he said, look, we are in the meeting, and we will get back to you, and this is what happened. So what did they do? They just completed 30 days, and they said it could not be seen anywhere in the territory of Morocco, right? And these are the different regions in, so 16 regions, they go out to sight the moon in Morocco. So there's 278 points, different places where the moon is seen, even right here, by the way, which usually has a very good chance. And they even have like kind of naval people, as they mentioned to us, in the sea, on the coast here, that go out to sight the moon. I mean, they're really robust in this regard, right? So they even have people like naval officers who are trained in moon sighting, who on the extreme west coast, you can see the moon have the best chances. They even ask them to sight the moon, right? So we have a problem again in the UK. We have a negative sighting from Morocco, and you had a positive sighting from Saudi Arabia, and the people are in confusion about what to do. So here you can see, right? So you have this from Morocco, and you have this from Saudi, right? There's a negative sighting in Morocco and a positive sighting in Saudi. Maybe we leave. This is a really tight one, as you can see, right? So sometimes it gets very tight. It gets very tight because on the extreme, on the left, on the west coast of Saudi Arabia, which is basically Hijaz, right? There is a small chance that the moon can be seen with optical aid, right? On this west coast of the yellow part here is only visible with binoculars or a telescope, but the green part here, it's not. It's got a slightly better chance, right? According to the moon visibility criteria you see. So the Hijaz has a better chance, but Central Arabia, has a less of a chance, and let alone the east. That was the day before where it was impossible to say. So you can see here, right, just a map of Saudi Arabia, right? So here is the region here where if the moon was to be seen, it should have been seen. And they actually have, for example, in this region, as those of you familiar with Saudi Arabia's geography, those that live there, of course, as well. If you are in regions like Taif and Baha, which are quite elevated regions, right, above sea level, they don't have a desert as well. They have a better chance to see the moon. One, because it's further west, and also because of the climate and the dust. Whereas in Central Arabia, if you are in areas where there's much more desert, you could have a sandstorm, there's a lot more dust in the air, it makes it more difficult, even with the possibility of seeing the moon according to the moon site invisibility criteria, which is based on calculations. We also have to factor in things like cloud. We know that from the hadith, right? Could be hidden for various reasons, which could be cloud, it could be sand, dust in the air, and so on, right? So these regions, which are relatively dust-free, and the zero region, and quite high elevation, they should have a better chance. But what happens? This is the key question now. Why is it, and this is the question I'm going to pose here, and this is all basically for us to ponder and to think about, and rather than to be, my point here is not really to be critical as much as it is to make us think. Well, if you think then you are critical, so probably the same thing. Why is it that we never see, and on this occasion, we didn't see any sightings and reports from the west part of Saudi Arabia here, but the announcement came from here, a place called Thalea. Was it Thalea? Was it Sudan? It's usually one or two. Sudan. Right? Why is it that we get the announcement coming from Sudan or Thalea, but we don't get it from anywhere in the Hijaz? In fact, some of the tweets that I saw where there were some astronomers that looked to be experts in the field, in, for example, the University of Taif, not for this occasion, but on other occasions, I went into the observatory, clear sky, had a look, I could not see the moon, Saudi astronomy. But yet we get reporting from somewhere else in Saudi Arabia. So this raises questions about, it's not possible. Why is it not possible? Because the moon, as we just said, rises from the west and sets in the east. It's not possible for the moon to jump over Mecca, Medina, Jeddah, Taif, Baha, and land in Riyadh. Right? It doesn't play gymnastics and jump over one region and get into another region. It just doesn't do that. Right? It can't do that. It's not possible. It would be a bit like saying it's daytime now or daytime did not occur in Saudi Arabia, but daytime occurred in the UK first. Wouldn't happen, right? Because the sun rises from the east and sets in the west. So the sun has to pass over Saudi Arabia and Morocco and all of these other regions before it gets to the UK. The same way the moon has to pass over the west before it gets to somewhere further east. It can't jump over any regions, obviously, right? If that's clear. It has to pass and follow its own course, which is from west to east. Has to be seen. It's a different matter if the moon is in the northern hemisphere or southern hemisphere, but along that same track, it should be seen. Right? There's no way that on that same track it wouldn't be seen. Apart from if there's cloud or something else in one region, that's a different matter. But scientifically and astronomically speaking, that's how it works. And this is the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the sun. We can talk a bit about that more later about scholars who talked about astronomy and evidences for that. Again, you can see here, just very quickly, the same point, you can see that Morocco here is further west. How would it be possible for Morocco not to see the moon and any of these regions here, but for it only to be seen here? That's the critical question here, right? So it's more a question of just asking yourself, a logical possibility of this happening is basically doesn't exist, right? It can't pass through all of the Maghreb here, North Africa, and it cannot just land here. This is the problem we have, right? Now, one of the ways that this situation can be solved is that, okay, of course, it doesn't really concern us here in the UK when Saudi announces that he wants for this person. In Sudan, it was a person called Sudan generally who was always sighting the moon. And in Dubai, it's another individual, I think it's called Marvesh, is it? It's these two people usually, right, who sight the moon, not only in Saudi Arabia, but pretty much the first to see it in the whole world, right? And it's usually between Sudan and Dubai. Interesting point here, which I'd like to come to is, okay, that's about a bit for Saudi Arabia between themselves. Why here in the UK do we feel compelled that we should follow the decision of Saudi Arabia? is there anything from the Sharia which compels us to follow Saudi Arabia? And the first place we could look to doing that is the actual scholars of Saudi Arabia themselves. What do they say about this particular matter? So when the ulama of Saudi Arabia, the senior scholars, like Ibn Baz and Ibn Uthaymeen, were asked this question, that is it incumbent, is it wajib, is it compulsory for other countries to follow the moon sighting when it happens in Saudi Arabia, and particularly Makkah, because it's the center of the world, because this is one of the arguments that comes out, the center of the Muslim world, that we should follow Saudi Arabia. And by agreement, there's the English translation. I've got simple ones here we can see here, right? As for those who say that it's necessary to follow the sighting of Makkah, then let it be known to them that there is no proof or basis for this in the Quran and Hadith. Okay. Shaykh Uthaymeen, similar, says that this is impossible from an astronomical point of view because the sighting of the new moon, as Shaykh al-Islam Uthaymeen says, differs according to the scientists who are well versed in this field. Because it differs, then each country should have its own moon according to the reports and according to science, right? So they have various sayings of this, like لكل بلدة رؤيته, right? So you can see here that there is no obligation on anybody to actually follow Saudi Arabia. So this begs the question of why people would be insistent that if it's been announced in Saudi Arabia, we must follow it. And I would also invite people in this room here and in Exeter and around, why we feel an obligation that we should follow Saudi Arabia when Saudi Arabia themselves are saying, do not follow Saudi Arabia and follow your own local inside. That would be one very easy solution that doesn't upset many people, which we don't need to get involved in the moon sighting process of Saudi Arabia, which I'll explain in a moment. And we just kind of stick to our own criteria, whatever that might be. Maybe this video is worth quickly seeing. Just reminding the time. So again, very simple video explaining. A Saudi scholar has been asked in the Haram here.
في سائر الأمصار إذا كانت المدة مقاربة عن المدة في المملكة هنا في الحسبان، يعني مثل يقول مثلا يوم عرفة وافق مثلا يوم الاثنين والعيد يوم الثلاثاء، ويكون يوم عرفة مثلا في المغرب يوم الثلاثاء يوم العيد، والارجاع هو العيد. النصوم رسوم عرفة يوم مكة وعيد يكون بعد، أو نصوم يوم الثلاثاء الذي يعيد وهو يوم عرفة والعيد يوم الثلاثاء. فهو الصحيح أنكم تصومون على رؤيتكم ولأهل بلدكم، فإذا كان لمن الرؤي الهلال تتبع مثلا الرؤية في تأخرت الرؤية مثلا هذه الحالة كل يتبعون رؤيتهم في البلد يتبعون بمكة تعرف يوم الاثنين والعيد في مكة يوم العيد نقول يوم الأربعاء ونقول تصومون والعيد عندكم يوم الأربعاء مشهور لأن العلم لأن اختلاف القرآن والتبع كما نقول أن يقول
Okay, I think we get the idea here. What the Sheikh is saying there is no obligation of following Saudi Arabia, even for Eid al-Adha, which usually because people see Hajj occurring on the television screen, it makes it very difficult for them to have Eid on a different day. It's kind of a psychological, emotional, spiritual attachment. But in terms of a Sharia basis, I mean, even logically, if you think about it, like 50, 60 years ago, people didn't know when Hajj was happening, so they had no idea. when that message would get across that what is the day for Hajj 70, 80 years ago. So of course these are things that we could have relied on and depended on. That people would know when Eid is happening or when Hajj is in Saudi Arabia, and therefore we're going to follow it. So you can see that as a Dalil Shari, it doesn't really have any standing, even logically thinking about that. I mean, what's actually happening here? You might think, why is this happening? I mean, the best explanation we can give is that there is a calendar, which you know about, which Saudi Arabia follow, called the Al-Qura calendar. These announcements that happen, which we find extraordinary, right, when they do come out, always concur with the Al-Qura calendar of Saudi Arabia. And a couple of years before, some of those Saudi students, you probably don't know, we used to have some of these discussions. When I used to tell them that, you know, there's going to be an announcement from Saudi Arabia that someone saw the moon. And they're like, how can you say that now? They're going to go out there and see the moon. If they see it, they see it. If they don't, then they're going to complete 30 days. And then they came back to me and said, how did you know that was going to be the day? And how did you know they're going to see the moon? So I said, of course, I haven't got any knowledge of the unseen that I can tell you this. Basically, I can just look at the Al-Qura calendar and tell you that the moon sight is going to happen on this particular day, right? 2-3 past different Ramadans and Eids in conversation, and they saw that each time was matching with the calendar, and then they were convinced finally that it wasn't some kind of mystical knowledge that I've got or unseen knowledge that I can predict the future or when it's going to happen. It's basically a very simple thing that was going on. You've got a calendar and you've got certain announcements happening. That's the best conclusion we can have. We'll be coming to an end now. Just some interesting things. What happens sometimes is that in these debates, so some people will declare Eid or Ramadan a day early, and then the next day after they've announced, they'll say, oh, but the moon was sighted in America, we heard this morning, right? So the claim is made first, and then they will follow with the evidence a day later. This is obviously logical fallacy, right? Because the lead is to be muttasil with the da'wah. You can't have a da'wah and then have a dalil which is affiliated to it and is not able to establish it. So this was quite a funny one. There was a dialogue actually that happened in Urdu between some scholars on this. But I deleted it here because there's no Urdu speakers. It was quite a funny one actually. Somebody said, where can you show me anywhere in the world at this point right now where the moon has been sighted? And the answer the person said was, he said, I will give you the proof tomorrow. And it was, so I've saved that, I've got it as a screenshot and I've transcribed it. It was actually hilarious when the other person was actually saying, since I'll give you the proof tomorrow. Meaning, because in the west coast of America, there was a chance that the moon was going to be sighted, but obviously by the time this debate was happening, they couldn't establish it, right? So they wanted to establish it again. So burden of proof is on those people who actually claim to sight them, not on those people who haven't yet sighted the moon are going to complete 30 days, right? This is another logical fallacy. Right? So we know, حَتَّى تَرَوُا الْهِلَالَ لَا تَصُومُوا. So the burden of proof is on the people that say that they've saw the moon, not the other way around, saying, why are you not doing Ramadan on this day, or why are you not doing Eid on this day? The burden of proof is for you to establish the Hilal is being proven, has been established. This is, again, possibly slightly sensitive versus the claim versus the proof. If we had a claim of, or let's say the position was that we are starting a new month because we have a certain astronomical criteria by which we start the new months, that might not be according to moon sighting. That's a different discussion we can have when we go back to the Quran, the sun, and say, well, we mean the Hilal. Right? For example, Turkey. Turkey has a calendar based on some scientific calculations which do not correspond to the Hilal. Right? The moon is born, yes, fine. But it doesn't, and they've got some certain criteria what they use. The moon has to set after sunset, something like this. And they don't claim that they've seen the Hilal. The problem we have here is the claim is that it's not for astronomically or some scientific data that allows us to start the new month. The claim is for moon sighting, right? So that claim does not correspond with the proof. When we scrutinize that proof, then we find out that there's a problem, right? It does not stack up to the proof when you scrutinize that against the science, the astronomical calculations. It doesn't work out. That's the problem we've got here. If there was some correspondence and these two things could meet, then at least we are somewhere, right? There's consistency in the argument. So there's a problem because there's a chasm or a gap between claim and proof. So just some basic kind of logic helps us to do this. Very quickly going to go through these. The good news is for this talk is first of all, let me just tell you this. Let's go to Ramadan. Ramadan. Oops, I don't have the right one for Ramadan. Okay, so that's the day before for Ramadan. So Ramadan is going to start the same day for everybody. Again, this was something. How are you predicting the future? But I will tell you right now that in Saudi, in tomorrow's today, there will be no moon sight on the 29th. Right? And that's the way you can go away from this talk a little bit convinced and say, you know what, he told me something. I'm going to wait for that night. And if that doctor in that room was saying what he was saying right, then it's going to really make me think. Right, that's going to be the way to be convinced that on the 29th, on this night, Saudi Arabia will go out and the rest, no, not the countries, only Saudi Arabia will go out, and I'll tell you what. To sight the new moon, and they're not going to see it, and they're going to start, and they're going to complete 30 days, and they'll say the moon was not seen, and we're going to complete 30 days. Right? So we will start on the same day, but for different reasons. Why are there different reasons? Because of Sha'ban. What happened? And by the way, this is also interesting. In Saudi Arabia, moon sighting does not happen for 12 months. You'll never find an announcement saying that they went outside the moon and they didn't see it. It happens for Sha'ban, Ramadan, Shawwal, Dhul Hijjah, 4 months. That's it. For those 4 months, moon sighting happens. For the rest, they rely on the Qura calendar. And as my argument is, it's basically all the Qura calendar, but we have sightings with these 4 months. What happened here in Sha'ban is, on this particular day, again, we had the same problem. It wasn't possible to sight the moon in Saudi Arabia, yet there was an announcement made, right, which I saw, I think it was straight away, that the moon was seen in Kuwait. No one else saw the moon. Negative sight again from Morocco and other places that were outside the moon. So Sha'ban began on different days. The difference, what's going to happen is now, when it comes to, sorry, as you can see, the next day, the whole world will see the moon. So that's when the other countries and those that were not following that announcement started a bit. So what happens now in Ramadan is they're going to go out to sight the moon only in Saudi because of this issue of beginning Sha'ban a day early, when there is completely no chance and not even any point to go and sight the new moon. Right? You can see the figure is red here. The moon sets before sunset, and that's going to give you a clue to the Qura calendar as well. The Qura calendar will not begin a new date when the moon set before sunset. That's the basic idea. You can pull up one of these maps for any month, by the way, even for 10, 15, 20 years, because the calculation is the same. Just to show you what the situation here is. Age is only 1 hour 48 minutes. Time minus 9 degrees. You've got a minus lap time. The lap time is typically, as we mentioned, 50 minutes, sorry. I should say minutes, not degrees, sorry. Lap time. Minus 9 minutes, not degrees. And an altitude of minus 2 degrees below the horizon. They shouldn't be going out there to see the moon because they've started Sha'ban a day early. That's what's happening. So for that reason, Ramadan, they're going to go outside a day early, but there's no point doing it. And then you will have the completion of 30 days. That's what we'll do. But we will start on the same day for 30 days. Right? Problem where we're going to have, right? Sorry, I've got the date here for them. So this is the next day when you can. So this is the actual, should be the 29th, as you can see. Right? This should be the 29th when everybody's going out to sight the new moon, which is the 22nd of March. And because it's very easy to see the moon, many places will see the moon. And on the 29th, then they will begin Ramadan. Yeah, in 29 days of Sha'ban, they will start the month of Ramadan. I'm not going to read numbers there, it's not complicated. So Ramadan will start on the same day by chance, or not because they follow the same criteria. That would be great. If that's not going to happen. We're going to have a problem for Shawwal. And again, prediction coming up, and then let's see what happens. Because we're probably not going to get all to meet together in Shawwal. So what's going to happen in 20th of April? You're going to find a sighting. This is how I'm predicting it. And I would ask you and invite you all to question how is that sighting about. And you're going to have Morocco's 278 points saying they could not sight the moon. Same problem is going to happen. And we're going to have a difference. So some people will be doing Eid on the 21st, and others will be doing it on the 22nd. Between these two ideas of criteria, these two visibility maps, and as the criteria shows, right? Dhul Hijjah will be another problem again. So we're starting Ramadan on the same days, but then Eid, the two Eids are going to be different. Because here again, you're going to have a date which is going to be for a sighting on the 19th, and another date for a sighting, which is going to be on the 20th, right? So the next day, obviously, evidence. So what kind of solutions do we have here? And I want to hear questions from everybody once we have it and your points and discussions. More insights in Muslim countries, right? Farq Kifaya, Sunnah, revive the Sunnah which we've all left, and go out there and sight the moon. Like, especially I would say, invite those people in Saudi Arabia, go out there and sight the moon. See if you sight the moon if you haven't seen the moon. And it is a complicated issue that even in Dubai and Sudan where it's seen, it's only usually one individual that sees it, where there's other people around. Who else is seeing it, even in those regions? Honestly, I'd be so happy and I would love it if somebody in Mecca and Medina gave me a call and said, I saw the moon and I've got friends and I asked them, did you see that tonight? We didn't see it, right? So more moon sight is in Muslim countries. I mean, in the UK or in the Northern Hemisphere, we can still see the moon, I've come to that, right? But more moon sight is actually people going out there and seeing it. So if you have lots of people saying, you know what, we didn't see them, or we did see them, the force of the people's witnessing or non-witnessing will have a great impact upon what the public psyche is and how these things are determined. So a lot more people getting involved in sighting, and this is something that we've left, which we should really have left. I think some of that's probably because of the invention of calendars and modern moon sighting techniques like astronomy. Great awareness of the science and scientific maps and astronomical calculations. It's very easy. The simplest thing I say to people is, you know what, don't listen to me or anybody else. Just go on Google, type in, can the moon be seen tonight? Once or twice I've actually phoned up the Royal Observatory. You can call them here, by the way. Phone them and they'll say, who do you want to speak to? I want to ask, was the moon visible last night? We'll put you through to an expert, a scientist. We'll put you through to a scientist, hold on a second. You can have a discussion with them and they will tell you. It's that simple. Or you can just Google it and find out what's going on. So more awareness, scientific awareness of the astronomical calculations. Simple thing like, if the moon's 2 hours old, it can't be seen, right? Or 7 hours old or 8 hours old. Easiest thing that people can report on. So idea of recognizing local authorities. What I mean by this is if we get away from the idea of what is one country saying and what is another. If you're in a particular country, you follow that jurisdiction. That's what can you do? Our country's made an announcement, you're just going to follow the announcement. That's what people do. So if we can come to recognize that authorities, there's no authority in Saudi Arabia that is saying to Muslims here, saying to Saudis studying here, right, like many of you are, or Muslims here next to masjid, so saying, you must follow our announcement. I've never seen that. And I don't think any of you have. Right? So when they are actually themselves not, whatever their criteria is, we can lead them to it, right? And that's their internal matter. You've got a hakim, you've got a government jurisdiction that's announced, that's got its own sharia validity, right? You've got a hakim telling you that this is something you can do. But that does not have jurisdiction over Muslims here. Right? Whether you are Saudi or non-Saudi. So a very easy way is when they are not imposing upon us here to follow the announcements or decisions made there. In fact, the opposite. They're telling you not to do this. So why do we insist on something they are telling you not to do? In fact, if you want to be a loyal follower, then you do as they say. You don't do the opposite of what they do in the mukhalafa of what they are actually instructing you to do. So I find that always bizarre, right? It's not like they're silent on this matter. They're actually saying to you, don't follow our announcement. There's some interesting stuff I think you find on the internet where some people from America, they visited Sheikh Hussein and they asked him personally, in America we have this problem. What should we do? He said, don't follow Saudi Arabia. Don't follow our announcements. You organize this, come to a decision according to your own local circumstances in the States. You should not be following Saudi Arabia. But they say the reason why we're having problems is because we have some people doing this and some people doing this, right? So we'll keep us out. So then that begs the question of why we are doing that. So I'll finish there. I think I've done about 45 minutes. And I'll be glad to take questions, discussion. And like I said, in the spirit of openness, I'm happy to have a frank and sincere discussion about this topic. And I, as much as you are, would like to come to some sort of solution. At least in one country here, we can have either Ramadan and one day. That's my wish, and that's my thought.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mustafa, for this very critical talk. If you have questions, I have many questions actually, but I would like you to have some questions as well. Oh, we have here Moroccan defense. Yeah, defense. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, please.
Take away. Would it be accurate to say that for Western countries at least, it's safe to follow Morocco due to their accuracy in the work of moon sighting, or would that be incorrect?
It's a good question. Yes,
As a takeaway, basically.
yeah. So let's see if one comment. So the question here, usually is so the question is just a straightforward solution to this that we follow.
Not as a solution, just as a perhaps process until there is a unified or perhaps more honest policy.
Many people have this view because they say that Morocco is the closest Muslim country here where there is an Islamic jurisdiction. You've got Qadat, you've got courts, Islamic courts, you've got rule, and you've got a proper decision. So because Morocco is the closest country, Muslim country to us, where we have proper moon sighting, regardless of whatever's happening elsewhere, if we don't see the moon in the so we can look to the UK horizon, but as we see with some of these maps, let's say the moon is falling in the kind of southern hemisphere, or right, then what we can do is you just go to Morocco. That's a simple solution, right? For me, so you can see here again, right? Sometimes you get a better view, like there, for example, right? So yeah, we can't see the UK, but there's a chance that Morocco can see it. So one of the criteria that people do follow is we look to the UK horizon. If the moon can't be seen in the UK horizon, we look at the closest Muslim country to us that sights the moon, and that would be Morocco, where it's probably sighted. So people do that. My view on this is that I don't advocate it's above my authority to give one solution. I think that everybody's going to follow. Is first of all to pose some questions about where the problems lie and to eradicate some of those problems in order for us to arrive at a possibility of solution. And one of them might be, let's stick to just a UK horizon. If the moon can't not be seen in the UK, we'll just be 30 days, it doesn't matter. That might mean, by the way, that we're 2 days out of Saudi because of that, as you can see with something like this, that could happen, right? In some circumstances, right? Because if they're going a day earlier than the astronomical calculations, and the moon is in the southern horizon, it could be possible that Hajj is happening, and Eid there is happening, and the 2 days could happen, right? But if people are firm on this and say, we want to stick to just our own country, we're all going to come to an agreement on this, and that is a way to get people to agree, I'd be happy with that. There's another solution like this one, of the one that you mentioned, and it could be a solution, I'd be happy with that. I think whatever you do has to have some Shari'i basis to it, and as long as that's there, it's logically sound, it meets kind of basic ideas of science. Sharia is not based on mustahilat. We know this, right? Cannot be. So if there's something like that, then I think that's a possibility as well. But I wouldn't advocate at this stage, like say, one particular place, but that's definitely a strong argument.
Yeah. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salam ala rasulillah, Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa ala. Actually, this is a huge debate, I think, around the world and between Muslims community all over the world. It's also a huge debate in Saudi Arabia around either we have to start thinking about using telescope for moon sighting, or it just we have to see the moon by the eye vision. And I think from what I understand from your lecture, or to sum up, it's from the Islam or from our religion, mercy and kindness, it gives people the choice to follow their countries or their authorities, and it comes from Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam hadith, صوموا لرؤيته وافطروا لرؤيته. So it's like kept for people in everywhere. And as I also read from the fatwa of Bin Baz or Bin Uthaymin that you show, I think it's fine to fasting different days. There is no problem, or there is no disagreement between ulama that for each country or each continent there is specific days to. And I think we have to abide this rule and this hadith, so make it just not moon fighting, but it's moon sighting, and we just accept each other sighting. And I know it's from the maps, it show or it says something different from what's seen in Saudi Arabia, for example, in the previous years, or it, like we say scientifically, maybe came across what Saudi Arabia said about the month. But it's again, since the hadith said صوموا لرؤيته يفطروا لرؤيته. I think there is a space, and it's an important topic for us as Muslim actually, because our ibadah, our fasting, it's depend on this most sighting and a Hajj also. So, and I can say in Ramadan it's more easier, because in Ramadan each people they fasting in their countries and celebrate it. It may be more complicated for Hajj, which make it difficult because all people from around the world they come to Saudi Arabia and they have to do Hajj. But I think it's from what I understand it's fine. Like we have to accept the sightseeing everywhere and not say this right or this wrong.
That's a very good comment there, because it's actually not a difficult problem if you think about it. Like I said, there's a lot of women fighting, but it's actually not a different problem if we just follow those principles that say you follow your own jurisdictions, follow your own countries, right? Whatever the authorities in your country decide, you can go with that, right? That would make things a lot easier. So then we don't need to, like you said, get into a discussion about the validity of astronomical calculations. By the way, Ibn Baz and Al-Thani, both of them, they accept binoculars and telescope. But establishing the new moons purely based on science, without any science, they don't agree with it. And that's a fine position to hold. But they allow, like, so they say, Mujarrada is not necessary only, right? So you can use an ala, which will help to magnify and be able to see. They don't have a problem with this. But to simply rely on astronomical calculations, they don't. By the way, I'm not saying this. I'm saying we can use astronomical calculations to negate something that might be impossible. But I'm not saying that we completely give away. As you can see, one of my solutions is actually saying that we should all engage in physical moon sighting, right? Has to be part of it, and that can be a tool, right, to assist us in establishing the new moon. But I agree with that. If you're in a particular country, you've got an Islamic authority, Muslim authority there, what's determining the new moons, and that's fine for you to go with. The issue is how do we deal with that situation here? And I want to have a frank discussion. Like, if I skip all of that out, then I'm hiding half of the discussion, really, right? Of what actually happens in the UK in some of these discussions and debates. So I had to bring out some of those maps, not for a Saudi context, but particularly for a UK context.
Yeah, actually, this brings to my mind a question about what is the situation or the case for us as a Saudi student here to follow Saudi Arabia or to follow the UK. And the problem, I think, in the UK, because as you said, there is no unified authority to announce. So even in the UK, maybe you find different parties and they like some follow Saudi Arabia, some follow Morocco, or one day. And this makes us as Saudi students maybe just follow Saudi Arabia because there is no specific date or specific authority which says this day will be the first for fasting.
Absolutely.
Can I add just one? Sometimes we don't want to do Eid, alone, you know. If I follow you, Mustafa, you go.
Another party,
for example, you can't do Eid in Manchester, but we are here. If I follow the real moon sighting, maybe I will do Eid alone in my home. Yes, and this is, is this a good excuse to just follow Saudi? Yes, I'm not.
You might be convinced by yourself, but if many of you here are convinced together, then that might be different issues. And there's 50 people, let's say, who have got awareness, right? That changes the dynamic, it changes the issue with them. I've spoken to the Mustafa Baig about this, so the best way is to approach people directly, right? If there is enough people where what can create a discussion, and this is how things move and how things change. Yes, in other cities, exactly as you said, you have different masjids doing it on different days. So what you do, especially as a Saudi, or let's say as a non-Saudi, because in the same family, by the way, you have people doing it on different days in the same families in all these cases, and it's hard for some people. Half of the family or partner is doing it the next day, and someone is doing it a day earlier. Don't know some of the other people who are not Saudis in all these cases where in one family you'll have different days, or especially my cousins, because they go to that masjid and they go to different masjid. So as Saudis, what you do, and especially this city where there's only just one kind of decision made, then you're at the mercy of whoever's making that decision. But if there are enough people to raise awareness, that is the best way that we can get change in these things, is to raise some awareness.
Yeah, just very short answer.
Okay. So, deriving the question from what you said in your presentation and as well in the response to one of the questions.
Yeah.
So you said that we can negate the citing in certain countries based on that which astronomy tells us or science tells us. So isn't that a negation of the shahada of a trustworthy person?
That's a very good question, right? So some of the ulama.
Can you say the question again?
Okay, so the question is something that I didn't want to open up a discussion about, so I just sneaked it in, but mashallah, he put it very quickly, right? So he said something there that I want to explore more. So the question quickly is, if the scientific data tells us that it's impossible to cite it, so we say, let's use scientific data as a proof tool, as a strong proof for nafi, but not for ithbat, right? For negating a sighting, but not for ithbat al-hilal, for nafi al-ru'ya, right? What happens then if somebody cites them? Are you not then giving precedence to science over the shahada? And as I mentioned in the beginning, that the shahada is basically asal of the sharia in terms of establishing, well, the hilal, but how you get there is through the shahada, right? Quick answer to that is that some ulama, like some of the scholars, especially many of the Shafi'i scholars, have said that this idea of negating the sighting, right, you can do using astronomical data because this is the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made this universe. And as I was saying earlier, the Sharia cannot be based on mustahilat. So because it's a scientific impossibility, somebody might make a mistake. We have that tradition, I think it's from, isn't Sayyidina Abbas, I think, right? Was with some, I think it's right, with some of the companions, and he said, oh, there's the hilal, and people could see it, and they couldn't see it. And he was quite old at this age. And they went to him, removed his eyebrow, and said, can you see it now? And he couldn't see it. So somebody made a mistake, or you can have some mental people, there's an error, something else going on. So there are possibilities when it's claimed that a moon has been seen for whatever reason, but it's absolutely impossible to see it, right? So you've got right now, we know that the moon and the sun is on a set course. This is the way that Allah has created this universe, this earth. It cannot go against that course that it's on, that mathematical course, right? So based on that, we can, especially today when it's so clear, I think, this is my view, that we can make that exclusion. And it's not just based only on science. As I mentioned, if anywhere, let's not pick any country, that's not what we want to do here. One or two people say they saw see the moon. Why is it that nobody in any surrounding region is seeing the moon, or any region west of that, anywhere? That's not more of a logical issue now, not even scientific. Let's say we didn't have any scientific maps. But if it's time and time again, some people see it, but others cannot see it or don't see it anywhere west of that causes a question in our minds or a reason for to do some sort of doubt and suspicion about what's going on. So,
I have a question. Maybe it's about an answer to Ahmed's question about al-hadith which say صومكم يوم تصومون وفطركم يوم تفطرون وأضحاكم يوم تضحون. What does this hadith?
So for me that hadith says that in your situation like you are in, right? When the people are fasting, when you are fasting, that's the day when you fast, right?
I mean, yeah, this is the point. I mean, even if there is disagreement in the citing, but there is a clear hadith guide you how to react.
Yeah, like a flexibility in this.
So I would say how we approach this, how we approach Islamic knowledge in general, you've got to see that hadith. Let's take a UK context now. So we're going to leave any Muslim country now and we come to the UK. This hadith, we have to look at it in the context of other hadith. And what are they telling us about the hilal, right? So you've got sumu li ru'yati. You've got la tasumu hatta taraw al-hilal, right? You've got the Quranic verse as well about the hilal. So if for some reason, let's say in another scenario, let's leave everything I've said now. For some reason, some people gathered around and say, for some reason they want to start the new month. And that reason for them starting the new month is completely bogus. If you want to take this this hadith. If you took it in its absolute literal sense, you would say, even if it's completely outrageous and bogus, you would follow because some people are doing it. We wouldn't do that. Right? Say, no, we have some clear criteria. Like we've got the Quran, we've got the hadith which tell us that just because people are fasting, we're not going to fast when it's so, like, I don't know, 20th of Sha'ban, somebody announces Ramadan. You're not going to look at that hadith because you've got a clear hadith which says you not to do that.
I think the hadith it's mean when the people disagree about the style thing. The clear, I mean, if it was, there is disagreement if they see the moon or not. Not about just some people try to make their opinion to something.
Yeah, it's got to be.
This is what the hadith mean.
So you've got to give it some context. It's
like إجماع, yeah? It's kind of إجماع.
if there is some context and some meaning to it. But so these scholars that I mentioned that says you can use it for nothing in the some of these ulama, some of the great scholars of Islamic law, they said even if there is a jam on the field, even if there are many people that go out there and say they saw the moon, but it's scientifically impossible to see the moon, right? These are pre-modern scholars, not modern scholars. Even then, you would reject their claim again because it's Muslim, right? Even if there are many people saying it, so they would still, those scholars would still disagree. Now, the problem we've got now also is, like I was saying to you, is do we actually have that situation if you break it down? Like, what I would try to do in that situation, somebody who's able to think for myself, is break it down and see what is the wajh al-khilaf, and do some tahqiq of the situation of why this disagreement has come about, and then how do you apply that hadith? Like, do both sides have a basis? For example, let's say here's my view. I've got a scientific map which says it's very close and you could sight the moon, right, with binoculars, but it's very tight. And then you have some group saying yes, we've sighted the moon. Others saying no, it couldn't be seen. I'd say fine. We've got this other hadith saying, you know what? Many people have said it's a very close call, it's very tight, like one of the ones I showed you for the Hijaz. Some might say, no, I don't believe they could have seen it. Others say we saw it. I will say, fine, everybody's decided that, you know, it's accepted, you go with it. So,
one of them, the first one is in the UK right now, some of them policy they go around the country and fight with them. So we're now in a position in this country where we do have political rights and stuff like that, theoretical and that's and all that. But practically, like in the UK, like Muslims do follow Saudi Arabia and Muslims. So what we say then is because you're in a Muslim country and you sort of in yourself Muslims would have said no, and it's not really wrong if you follow that. But obviously we're not in Muslim country, so if some people are seeing some people aren't, then you know, like what would you do? Would you just like do it on Twitter, or would you go, or would you, you know, follow the majority of the people and follow that, even though it's not, you know, but somewhat what you're saying to unity about that. Secondly, I think one of the opinions of our country is that was a global mentality, but I don't know if I'm really defending the view anything from that sort of stuff. I don't really want to extend that.
So let's try to get through that one quickly. So Nuclear Society doing great work. They're raising a lot of awareness about this. And they are calling towards local moon sighting, which is about sighting in the UK. They actually go out there and do it. And I do know them, had a conversation with them before, with Imad's, I know him. He's doing a lot of great work. And they've actually teamed up with the observatory in Greenwich and done workshops with them, and they've got some YouTube videos. I think everybody should check that out. They're doing great work. So like I said, if people come to that conclusion, I'd be happy to support it. Any way to get Muslims, like you said, to agree, that's fine. That comes to the question. That agreement has to be based on some sharing the legal way, right? It shouldn't be like, because this is my view, I want everybody to follow it. That's what happens like tribalism, right? Or sectarianism. This is something that should go beyond that, and people should have a bit of flexibility saying, what is the way that everybody can come around, right? I've got 2 or 3 which I'm willing to accept. Not just that I've got this one way and that's the only one I'm going to do, right? And that's what will happen. But if somebody says, right, let's everybody disagree on something, for example, say, right, we want to all say we follow Saudi Arabia. I can see one of the comments going back saying, no, Saudi Arabia is saying don't do that. They themselves are saying, this is not the way that you should be having unity. And others have said, unity is not about having, you know, the unity of the Ummah should not be dependent on the day that everybody does Ramadan or Eid, or, you know, we don't pray at the same time, because it's determined on the Shams. The Shams is different places. So is the moon. So it's not really a unity. It's never been among any of the Islamic fuqaha an issue of unity, apart from obviously the same place, because it's a jurisdiction, obvious. But it's never been a way of uniting the whole Ummah for everybody to do Eid and Ramadan one day. 50, 60, 70 years ago, it wasn't possible. Quickly on the Hanafi school position, yes, about ikhtilaf al-matali' and ikhtilaf al-matali'. So you've got this different. So the Hanafi school do have a view, but translation of calling it a global sighting is a misnomer. It's incorrect. People use this because there's no such thing as a global sighting because of the hour differences. Right? You know, UK cannot be followed by other countries because the hour difference is too much. Same as going. So the difference in the time zone And the distinction in terms of where it lies geographically in the world should not be too distinct, it should not be too far, which makes it impossible to do, right? So it's about regions that are close enough, not so far apart.
Last two questions, but I mean, we can discuss with Mustafa after the talk as well. I mean, and we can take. If you have questions.
The majority, I think, again, is not a way that we should just determine this, right?
So, my question here is, why are we being so apologetic? And that's if, like, Yani, I've always followed Saudi Arabia all my life, because even in Spain we follow Saudi Arabia. Last year you came to me and you said that Saudi Arabia was wrong and that I shouldn't follow it, but I still followed Saudi Arabia because I always follow Saudi Arabia. But now, after your explanation and after having discussed this previously, if we see that there is a country making a mistake in citing the moon where it is absolutely impossible for it to be cited, then just follow the closest to the most correct thing, right? It just doesn't make sense to me that after knowledge has come to you and after realizing that there are some nuances in the way in which we see the moon side and perhaps there are some political issues in there, why are we still attached to that instead of being attached to the truth, which I think is the most important thing for us as Muslims, to avoid sectarianism and all that.
So the direction again that I would draw you towards is that because their own ulama are not obligating anybody to follow, in fact, we need to do the opposite, right? We don't need to really even get into that discussion. That is part of the discussion, I agree, if you get into the detail with somebody, right? The point is that they've already said that, you know, whatever the Um Al-Qura calendar says or whatever we're doing here locally should not affect Muslims elsewhere. So we don't need to make that part of our solution, thrust it upon other people when they themselves say this is not the right way to approach this matter. In conversations, like I said, you can find people spoke to them and ask for guidance and advice. They said, you should not be following and looking at what we're doing here. You need to be looking at what your own countries are doing, right? So that's the way that the best way to approach it. That, you know, if you want to follow Saudi, then you follow Saudi properly, which is don't follow Saudi, is what they're saying. If somebody wants to follow them, what they're saying, if you are abroad, don't follow them. Same with your question. Saudi's abroad, they will say the same. If you ask any of these mashayikh, they will say, you don't follow our country, follow the Rؤية in your own land.
Last question. Okay, Mas.
Yeah. This might seem ignorant from my side, but why do they not take like a video of the actual sighting or like a picture to validate one's actual sighting with his eyes?
Okay, it's a good question, but it also wouldn't serve as a delil if you go on pictures, because the fact that pictures can be doctored, can be fabricated. What we have sometimes is really odd, right? So if you turn on one of these Sky channels, right, like Islam channel, and the announcement's been made, like for Ramadan or Eid in Saudi, they'll put a picture of the present, have it there, like a live picture, like a live view of the present moon. They don't say to you that's a live view of the present moon. But I've known people say, look, turn on Islam channel, there's the crescent. It's a pretty thick crescent, right? It's not a brand new crescent. And they think the crescent moon has been seen because they show you an image of it in the Quran. It's not the crescent that's claimed to be seen. It's not that, right? So images do happen. And I think if you get an image from a proper scientific authority, right? This data that I've been presenting to you here, by the way, these are not Muslims or non-Muslims. They've got no stake in this, so they're not like parties or sectarian. So you can trust their data. But you can imagine if you get this into the business of selling pictures, and somebody is very ideological about this, or you really want to show that they're Moscow, the organization they're involved in on the right day, it's maybe decided by a picture, then it gets risky. But people do put pictures out there, and if you trust the source, then that's fine. But is it going to be the sole determining factor or the final one? That's a risk. But yeah, if it's, let's say, in Dubai somewhere, have you ever seen pictures come out of it? No, I've never seen pictures of even CCTV images come out. And those sightings you will see, you know, you see the pictures on Twitter, and someone's looking like this, and you know, they've got that. You can't see this with a telescope. Or, you know, with advances in technology, you can't see this. How is this happening? So these are all questions, but that would help at least, right? If someone's got a picture and you can say, yeah, it would help. It wouldn't. I don't think it would solve it.
Yeah, then thank you very much, Dr. Mustafa, for this informative, very critical talk. Mm-hmm. And the Saudi society would like to present a little more.
Oh, it's not. So, you give me a gift after my process, and we start seeing.
No, it's not
even more kind of. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody.